A Russian tank column is moving through open farmland in eastern Ukraine. It's early spring 2026. The ground should be solid. The maps say there's a road. The commander has done this route before. What none of them know is that the field to their left, the one that looks perfectly solid, is not. Beneath about 2 inches of frozen crust is a meter of soft mud that will swallow a 45-ton tank like it's stepping into wet concrete. They know this because they've already lost 3 vehicles this week trying to go off-road, so they stay on the road. And that is exactly the problem. Because 3 kilometers away, a Ukrainian drone operator is watching them on a screen. He doesn't need to guess where they're going. He doesn't need satellite intelligence or a spy network. He just needs to understand one simple fact that the Russian commander figured out the hard way this morning. When the mud says you can only go one way, you go one way. And when you only go one way, someone is already waiting there. This is not a story about tanks being destroyed by weather. Weather doesn't destroy tanks. The mud doesn't kill the tank by itself. What it does is something far more dangerous. It tells the drone exactly where to wait. Let's start with a number that takes a moment to process. As of early 2026, Russia has lost, confirmed by visual evidence alone, somewhere between 3,800 and 4,000 tanks destroyed, damaged, or captured since February 2022. Ukraine's own military claims are higher, over 9,700 by their count, though independent analysts like the Oryx Group, who require photographic confirmation for every single entry, put the verified figure closer to that lower number. To put that in context, Russia has lost more tanks than most countries have ever owned. And here's the part that military analysts are still genuinely struggling to process. Russia started this war with approximately 13,000 tanks on active status and in storage. According to U.S. European Command General Christopher Cavoli, testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee, Russia is, quote, starting to approach near the end of the useful tanks in storage. They are running out of the good ones. What's showing up on the front line now tells the story. Russia has been deploying T-62 tanks, a design that entered Soviet service in 1961. For reference, 1961 is the same year the Berlin Wall went up, the same year the first American was launched into space, and about 20 years before the average viewer of this channel graduated high school. Russia has confirmed losses of at least 334 of these T-62s by January 2026, with more going forward constantly because the newer inventory is being conserved or has already been destroyed. The mechanics in Siberia are reportedly pulling working parts from multiple derelict tanks to cobble together single functional ones. Russia is producing up to 100 tanks per month at its war production pace, which sounds impressive until you look at the burn rate. In early 2026, confirmed tank losses were still running at roughly 6 vehicles per day. You do not need a calculator to see that those numbers don't add up in Russia's favor forever. So the question becomes, what exactly is doing this to them, and why can't they stop it? To understand the trap, you need to understand the terrain. The word is Rasputitsa. It's Russian, which is ironic given the circumstances, and it translates loosely as the time without roads. It refers to the 2 seasonal periods each year when the vast flat plains of Ukraine and Western Russia turn from solid ground into something closer to warm caramel, spring thaw, fall rains. The frozen surface melts or saturates, and the ground beneath, which has the structural integrity of a well-used sponge, loses its ability to support anything heavy. And a modern main battle tank is very heavy. A modern tank weighs 45 tons. When it gets stuck, you don't just push it out. You need specialized recovery equipment that is itself a target the moment it stops moving. This is not a new problem. Napoleon's armies dissolved in it. The Germans had a word for it, Schlamm, and it stopped their Eastern Front offensives cold. The mud has been defeating armies since before armies had equipment. What's different in 2026 is what happens next. In Napoleon's time, a stuck supply wagon meant a delay and some cursing in French. In 1941, a stuck panzer meant the crew got out, found some logs, and spent several unpleasant hours trying to free it while hoping the Soviet artillery didn't notice. In 2026, a stuck tank means a drone operator somewhere has just been handed a fixed, immobile target with a confirmed position, and they have as much time as they need to deal with it. The mud doesn't destroy the tank, it just holds it still long enough for everything else to do the job. Here is how this actually works on the ground in 2026, and it is more coordinated than most people realize. It starts before the Russian column ever moves. Ukrainian engineers, increasingly using drones to do the work, seed roads and approaches with anti-tank mines. Not randomly, specifically. They study the terrain, identify the choke points where the mud forces vehicles onto paved surfaces or narrow tracks, and they mine those exact locations. The TM-62 anti-tank mine, a Soviet-era design that Ukraine has modified and updated extensively, weighs 10 kilograms and contains enough explosive to blow the track off any tank currently in Russian service. Modern versions use smart detonators with gyroscopes, accelerometers, and magnetometers. They activate a set time after being dropped, can run on battery power for up to 14 days, and are triggered by the magnetic signature of a large metal object passing overhead. You can drop these from a drone at night, in fog, in rain, without putting a single engineer within range of anything Russian. So, the sequence begins like this. Ukrainian drones, operating at night, seed the road network with mines at the locations terrain analysis has identified as unavoidable. The Russian column moves up at dawn because dawn is when visibility is better and commanders feel safer. The lead vehicle hits a mine, the track blows off, the tank slews sideways and stops, blocking the road. Now the column has a problem. They can't go around mud, they can't reverse. That's a traffic jam under observation. The recovery vehicle rolls up and becomes the largest stationary target on the road. The column clusters, and that clustering is exactly what a drone operator needs. This is the moment the Ukrainian drone operators have been waiting for. A real-world example. Near Dobropilya in October 2025, Russian forces attempted a large-scale mechanized assault with 22 armored vehicles. They came from the Malinivka area. Ukrainian artillery and drone units destroyed 9 tanks and IFVs and damaged 4 more than half the assault force, effectively ending the attack. Reported separately, near Volodymyrivka, 5 armored vehicles advanced from Novotoretsk, got trapped in mud near the Kazeny Torets River, and were then destroyed by Ukrainian FPV and bomber drones along with HIMARS artillery. 3 of the vehicles actually sank in the river. Some of the Russian troops abandoned their vehicles on foot and were then targeted by artillery during their retreat. These are not exceptional incidents. They are the pattern. Mine stops the column, mud removes the options, drone finishes the job. Let's talk about the weapon that is doing most of the actual killing, because the numbers here are genuinely staggering in a way that matters beyond this conflict. The FPV drone, first-person view, is a racing-style quadcopter fitted with an explosive warhead and flown by an operator wearing a headset. Depending on the variant, it costs somewhere between a few hundred and a few thousand dollars. The tank it can destroy costs between $2 and $6 million, weighs 45 tons, requires a crew of 3, needs fuel, maintenance, spare parts, and a logistical tail that stretches back hundreds of kilometers. One of those things costs more than a house in most of the world. The other one costs less than a decent used car, and on this battlefield, the cheap one is winning. Ukrainian drone pilots in 2025 carried out 819,737 confirmed successful strikes, all verified by drone video footage. In that same year, Ukrainian military statistics report that 4 out of every 5 Russian military targets destroyed or damaged in combat were taken out by a drone. Not artillery, not missiles, drones. Ukraine's top-scoring drone unit in 2025, the 414th Unmanned Systems Forces Brigade, known as Birds of Magyar, confirmed 18,297 hits on individual Russian soldiers, along with 124 tanks, 319 lighter armored vehicles, 257 artillery systems, and 4,058 enemy drones knocked out, 1 unit, 1 year. Ukraine's defense minister announced in January 2026 that the drone forces plan to expand dramatically, with a target of producing 7 million drones in 2026, up from 4 million in 2025. About 95% of all drones used in combat are domestically manufactured. The goal for 2026 is to extend effective strike range from 20 kilometers behind Russian lines to 100 kilometers. Russia has tried jamming systems, cage armor that looks like shopping baskets welded to the turret, dedicated counter-drone units. None of it has stopped the losses. The cage armor works sometimes, particularly against older rocket-propelled warheads that detonate on contact. But Ukrainian operators adapted. They aim for the gaps. They come from angles the cage doesn't cover. They hit the top of the turret where the armor is thinnest. The FPV is maneuverable enough to thread through gaps that a missile couldn't navigate, and the operator, wearing a headset and seeing exactly what the drone sees, can make real-time adjustments all the way to impact. And when one drone isn't enough, they send 3. You may have noticed, if you've watched any footage from this war, that Russian tanks don't just catch fire. They tend to explode in a very specific and dramatic way. The entire turret is launched into the air, sometimes to a height of 20 or 30 feet, rotating as it goes. Occasionally it lands 50 meters from the hull. The crew has essentially no chance of survival when this happens. This is not bad luck. It is a design flaw that Russian engineers chose to live with for 60 years because it made their tanks smaller and cheaper to produce. Soviet and Russian tank design uses an automatic loading system that stores shells in a carousel underneath the turret in the crew compartment. Western tanks, American Abrams, British Challenger, German Leopard, store their ammunition in a separate compartment at the rear of the turret, behind blast panels. If that ammunition cooks off, the panels blow outward and away from the crew. It's not good, but the crew has a chance. In Russian design, the ammunition is right there with the crew. When a Ukrainian FPV drone penetrates the top of the turret, where the armor is thinnest, often just 20 to 30 millimeters, the warhead detonates inside or near the carousel. The stored shells begin cooking off in sequence. The pressure has nowhere to go except up. The turret leaves the tank at high speed. Military analysts have taken to calling this the jack-in-the-box effect. It's become so associated with Russian tank losses in Ukraine that it has its own entry in multiple defense publications. The Russian military has known about this vulnerability since at least the First Chechen War in the 1990s, when it happened repeatedly in the streets of Grozny. Russia's newest tank, the T-14 Armata, finally fixed this. It exists in such small numbers it's barely appeared on the front line. The tanks actually getting blown up, the T-72s, T-80s, T-90s, all have the same carousel, all have the same weakness, all get hit from above, which is precisely where Ukrainian drones attack from. Here is what Russia did when it ran out of answers, and it's not what you'd expect from the country that invented modern tank doctrine. Russia has largely stopped using tanks as assault vehicles. Since World War II, tanks lead assaults. That's the entire doctrine. And Russia, facing unsustainable losses to mines and drones every time its armor moves in the open, has quietly stopped doing it. What's replaced the tank assault? Mostly people, on foot, sometimes on motorcycles, occasionally, and this is not a joke, on horses. Satellite imagery analyzed by Euromaidan Press in January 2026 showed that in 2025, Russia's daily vehicle loss rate dropped to about 8 per day from a previous average of 16. Not because the vehicles had gotten harder to kill, but because fewer of them were being committed to attacks. Russia gained roughly 30% more ground in 2025 than in 2024, not with armor, but by sending waves of infantry through gaps that Ukrainian drone-dominated airspace couldn't always cover fast enough. The infantry pays a brutal price, but Russia can replace a soldier faster and cheaper than it can replace a T-72. And under a March 2026 decree, its mobilization now runs year-round with over 2.3 million personnel. The demechanization of the Russian military is, according to analysts, now complete. The army that began this war built around armored doctrine has become, by necessity, an infantry army, one that uses armor sparingly and only when the terrain and the drone situation are favorable enough to risk it. It is the signature of an army that has been forced to change everything it thought it knew about how to fight because the machines it relied on keep getting destroyed by something the size of a loaf of bread. March 2026, Russia's spring-summer offensive announced itself. The Institute for the Study of War tracked mechanized probes surging simultaneously across multiple sectors, the classic end-of-winter push before the mud deepened. On March 20th, 2026, a Russian assault column moved through thick morning mist toward Ukrainian positions. The fog should have helped them. It limits drone visibility and makes FPV targeting harder. Ukrainian drone operators had anticipated this. They'd seeded the approaches in advance. Remote mines detonated under wheels and treads as the column advanced. 7 quad bikes, 4 motorcycles, 3 cars destroyed. According to tracking by Transform Ukraine, 120 Russian soldiers were killed before the column reached its objective. The fog that was supposed to protect them had actually removed their ability to see the mines that were already waiting. Around the same period near Pokrovsk, a Ukrainian fiber-optic FPV drone, a newer variant that is nearly immune to electronic jamming because it uses a physical cable rather than a radio signal, found a Russian Ka-52 attack helicopter flying at low altitude and knocked it out of the sky. This is significant because the Ka-52 is Russia's most capable attack helicopter, worth tens of millions of dollars, and it was destroyed by a weapon small enough to hold in 2 hands. The Pokrovsk fighting also produced something worth understanding from both sides. A Ukrainian assault regiment, the 425th, launched a counterattack along the Hryshine-Pokrovsk road. The Russians had seeded that road with mines under cover of the same thick spring fog. The lead vehicle, an American M1 Abrams, hit a mine and was immobilized. A second vehicle accidentally went into a ditch. Russian fiber-optic FPV drones, also unaffected by the fog, attacked the remaining vehicles. The assault ended badly for the Ukrainians. The lesson cuts both ways, and it's important. The mine-mud drone kill chain does not belong exclusively to one side. It is the defining tactical reality of this front in 2026, and any vehicle column, Russian or Ukrainian, that moves along a predictable route without adequate mine clearing and drone suppression support is vulnerable to exactly the same sequence. If this changed how you see this conflict, hit like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.